Let's say I was a first century philosopher and someone came up to me and said, can you tell me who Paul is? What's Paul's personality? I'm gonna be like every other person and just say, yeah, Paul is probably choleric. But what if I tell you that on a deeper analysis, Paul is not who we think we are? Well, in this video, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to dissect the characteristics of Paul, what we know about him from the scriptures and from what people say about him. So let's dive in. So first of all, psychology 101, I don't know. We need to know the 4 temperaments. They're divided into 2. The extroverts and the introverts. So the extroverts are outer focused, the introverts are inner focused. Then under that we have 4 categories. So we have the sanguine, that is people oriented people. We have the choleric, they are task oriented. We also have the melancholy, they are also task oriented. And we have the phlegmatic, people oriented. So sanguine and choleric are under extroverts, and the introverts we have phlegmatic and melancholy. So we are going to consider a few questions that we will use to determine where we can categorize Paul. So first of all, how does he handle conflicts? Well, first of all, we know that Peter, that was a leader in Jerusalem church, withdrew from eating with the Gentiles out of fear of the conservative critics. Paul did not immediately quiet or ignore it. He confronted Peter face to face in front of the entire assembly. You can find that in Galatians chapter 2 verse 11 to 14, by the way. When brought before trials and governors and synagogue, he boldly debated his opponents. So from this, we can actually say that, yeah, he is extremely choleric and he shows zero phlegmatic conflict avoidance. And for context sake, a choleric person is a natural leader, a pioneer, a commander, is driven by ambitious, is decisive, is highly disciplined, and results oriented and focused. So sometimes we see a choleric person as fiery and impatient or blunt. So they are extroverted and they are task oriented. Then we have the sanguine. They are also extroverted and they are people oriented. So they are charismatic, they are networkers, they are party hosts, and they are enthusiastic, emotionally impressive, spontaneous, social, loves being around crowds, and can lack follow through or long-term discipline. Then we have the melancholy. They are introverts and they are also task oriented. So they are analytical thinkers and idealists, highly detail oriented, systematic, emotionally deep, self-sacrificing, perfectionist, driven by high standards and deep moral conviction. Then we have the phlegmatic, introverted, people oriented. So they are the peaceful diplomats, the calm, the easygoing, reliable, emotionally balanced, and conflict averse. Prefer stability and avoids controversy whenever possible. So first of all, we saw that Paul takes conflicts on another level, so he's extremely choleric. So let's also see how he takes his tasks and relationship. Which one does he prioritize? Because that will help us determine on which side he belongs. So on his second missionary journey, Barnabas wanted to take John Mark along. Paul flatly refused because Mark had deserted him on a previous trip in Acts 15:37 to 40. So the argument between him and Barnabas was so sharp that Paul and Barnabas parted ways. So actually, Paul, from this story, prioritized the success of the mission over preserving Barnabas' feeling or giving Mark a second chance at that moment. So since he's heavily task oriented, we can actually put him either in choleric or melancholy over people oriented, that is sanguine or phlegmatic. And just for context, let me read Acts 15:37 to 39. Actually says, Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had decided them in Pamphylia. They had such sharp disagreements that they parted company. So let's also take another one. We know it might be extremely choleric. We know it's more likely choleric or melancholic since he's task oriented. Now let's see what drives his momentum. In Philippians 3:13 to 14, Paul displays single-minded focus, and this is what he writes. He said, "One thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the mark." And in 1 Corinthians 9:26, he states, "I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a box fighter beating the air." So that also tells us that, he has high choleric drives combined with melancholy and discipline. So let's consider a few more. Let's see his communication and public presence. So when he was writing to the Corinth in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 10, his opponents noted that his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person is unimpressive and his speaking amounts to nothing. And Paul wrote this with his own hands in 2 Corinthians 10 verse 10. So he himself admitted that he did not rely on plausible words of wisdom or polished rhetorics according to 1 Corinthians 2:1-4. Yet he willingly stepped into the public square at the Areopagus in Athens to debate Epicurean and Stoic philosophers in Acts 17. So this tells us that his writing reveals that his melancholy, that is depth of logic, like the complex systematic argument of Romans. But his public boldness reveals that he is extroverted and choleric, willing to command the room. So we can actually be on the sideline and be like, okay, just like Paul is choleric or melancholic. How about we consider one more thing? How does he process suffering? I think that should help us a lot in determining where to pinpoint him. So Paul endures stoning, shipwreck, flogging, house arrests, but rather than retreating to despair or relaxing into passivity, he used his imprisonment in Rome to write several key epistles. We have the letter to the Ephesians, letter to the Philippians, letter to the Colossians, Philemon, and he influenced the Imperial Guard in Philippians 1 verse 12-14. So we can see that he has high emotional intensity and capacity for deep feeling, that is melancholy, combined with irrepressible drive to turn obstacles into strategic victories. So we can already tell that he is not phlegmatic and he is not sanguine. So in summary, let's just say Paul is an extroverted, choleric melancholy. So his choleric side makes him the fierce pioneer, an unyielding leader and a bold risk taker who builds a movement across the Roman Empire and even to today. Then his melancholy side gave him the intellectual depth to write the most complex theological letters in history, and the emotional intensity to endure immense personal suffering for his conviction. Well, there are other parts I didn't touch, like Paul's emotional life and him weeping in his letters, and it would be nice to compare him with someone like Simon Peter. But what I do want to bring out from this is that even though we can actually be philosophers ourselves or psychologists ourselves and actually say, okay, Paul was choleric, Paul was melancholy, one thing we do need to consider is the fact that Paul couldn't have done any of this on his own accord. I mean, being choleric and melancholy on his own is a very rare mixture. So I do want to point out that the Holy Spirit really helped him a lot. And let's not forget Jesus' parting words. He said, the Holy Spirit will guide you into all truths. I don't know your temperament, I don't know whatever temperament you have, but I do know that God is willing to use whatever temperament you have for His glory. You want to know what my temperament is? Well, that'll be a future thing, but for now, let's just appreciate the fact that God used someone like Paul to make such a massive impact. So let's just go with Paul was a melancholy and a choleric. Now let's see how we can also use our temperament to impact the world.